Hello, my name is Andy, and I am the village idiot, and I'm armed with a car and a GoPro, and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. Now, my regular viewers know by now that I'm a Lincolnshire boy. I come from Lincolnshire. I'm born and bred in and around Lincoln. But North Lincolnshire is an area that I know very, very well. However, this place is one I've never set foot in before in North Lincolnshire. So it'll be interesting to see what's here. This is Winteringham. This North Lincolnshire episode is sponsored by Past Days, a family history blog by June Terrington. You'll find her link in the description. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like, and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. Winteringham is a village of exactly 1,000 people in North Lincolnshire on the south bank of the Humber estuary, and what a pretty little place this is too. Winteringham's population at the 2001 census was 989, so it didn't grow massively in the space of those 10 years. From the lack of any new developments, I imagine that's still the case. I'd never been to this area of North Lincolnshire before, and if you haven't either, I strongly recommend it. You'll see why over the next 4 episodes. For now though, this is Winteringham, approximately 5 miles from a wildfowl refuge on the River Humber and 1 mile from the Winteringham Haven Wildlife Reserve. The village is in 2 distinct parts. The early core to the west is grouped around the church and is characterised by narrow, winding lanes. The east of the village is much different, with a straight grid of medieval streets lying around Market Hill, High and Low Burgage, Back Lane and Ferry Lane. The 2 parts of the village are linked by West End, which has some attractive pattern book Georgian townhouses. Here's some history for you. This is a place that has some Roman history, as they founded a settlement probably called Ad Abum in this area. It was where Ermine Street, the major Roman road between Londinium, otherwise known as London, and Lincoln, terminated on the south bank of the Humber. Travellers then crossed the river by way of a ferry or low tide ford to Peturia, which is now known as Brough on the north bank, where Cades Road continued onto York and Hadrian's Wall. A pre-Roman ridgeway called Easrlsgate or Earlsgate may have also resumed here on its route south and southwest towards the Midlands and southwest England. Indeed, Earlsgate can be seen referenced here. I passed a row of properties whilst I ambled around that go by the name Earlsgate Bungalows. So one thing I didn't know about Winteringham before I came here was whether or not it was going to be a hilly place or whether it was going to be flat or anything, and it seems it's fairly flat. It's not really uphill or downhill so far. Might change. In 1317, a market charter was granted to Winteringham and a new town was planned to the east of the existing core, hence the split into 2 parts. In 2017, it celebrated its 700th anniversary of the charter granted by King Edward II. The village is not the only one locally with Winter in its name. Together with neighbouring Winterton to the south, it was possibly named after Wintra, the first king of Lindsey. The Domesday Book described it as a prosperous place with 3 mills, a fishery and a ferry. It became the seat of a branch of the Marmion family. In the 19th century, there were 2 malt kilns, a mill, a boatyard, a brewery, brickyards, and by 1907 the North Lindsey Light Railway, something we'll touch on a bit more later. In all, this was a busy market town which in many ways was not unlike Hessle on the Humber's north bank. That includes its shipbuilding industry, although now there's no sign of that anymore. So Winteringham might be big enough to sustain a population of 1,000 people, but it's not quite big enough to sustain footpaths on every road. As you can see, on this side of the road we've got a footpath, on this side we haven't. And if I turn the camera around, neither side has a footpath here. Henry Kirke White, the Nottingham poet, to whom are attributed the words of the hymn "Oft in Danger, Oft in Woe," was educated at the rectory here in Winteringham in 1804 and 1805. Now, I'm led to believe that in more modern times the locals of this place devised a song aptly called the Winteringham Song. I believe it has more lines than this, but it opens, "Winteringham is a pretty place, it stands upon a hill. It has 2 chapels and a church and Charlie Clayton's mill." If any Winteringham locals know the rest, comment it down below. Here's Winteringham's demographics. This is certainly not what you would term a quiet village, despite the fact it's so far away from the nearest major town. Its figures suggest it's somewhat of a commuter village. 57% of the residents are of working age, around a quarter of them are over 65, and the rest are children. The 1,000 people who live here are spread over an area covering 13.1 square kilometres, although in actuality most are clustered around the main village. Regardless, that's a population density of 78.48. The ethnic makeup is pretty normal for North Lincolnshire. 99.3% of Winteringham's locals are white British citizens. And that all-important average house price stands at £238,000. You can get a semi-detached house here for £154,000 though, and typically a detached one for £321,000. Winteringham has a corner shop which doubles as the village post office. Highly recommended this. I popped in for some food when I'd finished with the village. Friendly staff. What seems to be a local institution would be Tomlinson's. This is an independent butcher's shop located on West End. It certainly smelt good walking past it. There's one public house here, and that's the Bay Horse Inn. This comprises 2 rooms. One is a large dining and function room, the other is a well-appointed bar. There are 2 ensuite rooms available as well. The Michelin-star Winteringham Fields restaurant is situated near the centre of the village. Apparently, this is world-renowned. It describes itself as a restaurant with rooms, and according to Winteringham Parish Council's website, people come from far and wide to partake in its excellent cuisine. Winteringham Primary School is a charming little building. The school works in partnership with South Ferriby's Primary School as part of something called the Bridge Federation. The playing field is next. This is pretty good for a small village. It's got practically everything you can think of, beginning with a large football pitch. It also has an all-weather sports facility where tennis, basketball or five-a-side football can be played. And there's a fenced-in play area for all those Winteringham youngsters. Let's talk religious buildings next. Here's All Saints Church. The nave here is 12th century and replaced a smaller, earlier church. The side aisles were added later, as was the chancel. The tower dates from the late 15th century. The church was in poor condition and there was a major rebuild in the mid-19th century. Much of the stonework was reused and old carved stones can be seen. On the east end of the south transept is a small carved figure which may have come from an old grave. Outside on the south wall are the remains of what could be an old gravestone. This is not the only place of worship in the village. On Low Burgage is the local Methodist chapel, which my route did not pass. We will see that though on the way to Winteringham Haven later. This is interesting. I think this might be a misprint. High Burgate, you'll find that on this bus timetable, which I'll talk a bit about in a moment, but the name of the street is actually High Burgage. Now, is that a misprint or was this once called High Burgate? I don't know. Whatever the case may be with the street name, there are 3 buses which stop here. These are the 350 to Hull, the 355 to Barton and the 360 to East Halton. This is a residential care home. It's called Spring House, originally known as Number 1 Western Green, and it was built around 1740. It's a Grade 2 listed building. Here's the village hall, situated on south side, adjacent to the playing field. This is used throughout the week by the nursery schools under 5s. Several other clubs and associations use the hall as their base, including the parish council, for its regular meetings. On the wall is the parish notice board, and this one's officially done. Landmarks time, and today we start with the War Memorial, which is a Celtic cross with a sword on its shaft. This has a total of 15 names, 11 from World War I and 4 from World War II. The next thing I can only describe as a gazebo. It's a nice little shelter on the playing field close to the playground and the village hall. Not bad if you need 5 minutes to sit down. There's a phone box here, although there's literally nothing in it as I'm showing you now. No book exchanges here, I'm afraid, although I'm sure there's one somewhere else in the village. Winteringham has these ornate looking signs. I found 2 of them during my walk. There might well have been more. They're adorned with the words Millennium Committee at the top. Recently, a council subcommittee made improvements to the village's numerous pathways and explored whether bridleways may be created. Currently, the parish has no bridleways. Those paths are all handily laid out on this next landmark. The parish pathways map is located opposite the pub and the shop. You know I can't resist a map, so I had a look. Now, what's one thing I always like to find in these places? A map, and I found one right here in Winteringham. So I'm going to go freehold for a minute so I can show you where I've been in the parish of Winteringham. So I'm here on this corner and my car is literally just parked there. All I've done is I've walked down here, across the playing field, which is here, and then round here to the church, which is there, and then come back down this road here, and that's where I am right now. I've gone round in a big circle. Now you'll notice that there's a road up here and across there, and up here is Winteringham Haven. I'm going to take the car up there when I'm done with the main walk around, and we will have a look at what's up there, because there is something up there that's quite interesting. Being on the banks of the Humber, natural landmarks are never far away. We'll see the Humber shortly, but here in the village we have something called the Scarborough Nature Corner. This has a wildflower meadow and a pond, and it won awards back in 1991. The locals replanted spring flowers and re-established the meadows in 2011 and 2012. Check out this water pump close to Easrlsgate bungalows. This had not just 1 but 3 plaques on the side of it. Let's get a closer look. It was originally erected in 1911 by public subscription by the mayor, and then restored in 1977, which was a Jubilee year. It was further restored in 2013 with the aid of a local craftsman. It seems it's not the only pump in Winteringham either. I spotted this in the grounds of the school. I wasn't totally sure if it was a pump or not, but it certainly looks like one. This was absolutely fascinating. We're used to seeing milestones on turnpikes all over the place, but here we have a highway boundary stone off Cliff Road. I wonder what this was all about. A national school was built here in 1845 to hold 143 children. In 1900 the attendance was 79. The school has since closed, and it's this house right here. A Wesleyan Methodist chapel was built in 1891 and a primitive Methodist chapel in 1837. This is the former, and it's also now closed as well. And making it a trio of former buildings, this one here looks suspiciously like an old shop. You'll come across this over the road from the butcher's. And just before we go out to Winteringham Haven, it's time for today's picture bit. Here it comes right now. Half a mile down Low Burgage north of the village is Winteringham Haven. I opted to drive down here as I planned to do some more walking when I got there. This passes the chapel on the right that I mentioned earlier. During the 18th century, land was reclaimed from the Humber Marsh and a new road improved access between the village and the haven. The South Humber Heritage Trail can be accessed here. A section of the trail along the Humber bank leads to the village of Witton, 3 miles to the west. This is where we need to touch more on the North Lindsey Railway. In front of you here is the Humber Yawl Club, which was once a Havenside goods yard. The railway between Scunthorpe and Winteringham opened in 1907 and a passenger service ran until 1925. The goods line to Winteringham Haven closed in 1951 and the tracks were removed. This is where Winteringham Haven station was located. The railway company provided 2 chutes to load ships, one for coal, the other for slag, a byproduct of the iron and steel making process. These days it's a bit different. A gentle walk here offers breathtaking views of the estuary and peaceful vantage points to enjoy large numbers of waders and wildfowl. And we're sort of familiar already with this footpath. If you remember the South Ferriby episode, you might recall the Nevcole Way. It runs along the south bank of the Humber. It seems strange to think now that in times gone by, this was so much more industrial, laden with the River Humber's barges. After all, it's a world away from Scunthorpe steelworks. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is it for the parish of Winteringham, here on the banks of the Humber. And it's time for me to move on to my next one here in North Lincolnshire. And just like Winteringham, I know nothing about it. It's about 3 miles away, so when I get there, a bit more discovery to be done, I think. This has been the parish of Winteringham, and I've been Andy, otherwise known as the Village Idiot, and I'm out.